Okay, so we want to review the Asha Code of Ethics and remember that this is the Code of Ethics that was established by a professional organization. So what that means is that any member of the professional organization would abide by this Code of Ethics. So Asha has a code of ethics, but you also have other organizations like the American Medical Association, AMA, for example, American Psychological Association, and AAA, the Association for Audiologists. So different professional organizations will have their own codes of ethics, and then that means that each person who identifies with that group has an agreement that they will follow them. So the Asha Code of Ethics was new and revised in 2016. As I noted before, Code of Ethics should be flexible, should be dynamic, meaning that this is a document that needs to be reviewed and updated periodically because things do change. So when we're looking at the Code of Ethics, there is a preamble at the beginning that is short, and it may seem that you can just skip over it, but I want to point out some things in the preamble that are important. Then you also have the principles of ethics, and there are 4 sections. Each principle has a particular focus, which we'll take a look at. So as I mentioned, we'll go back and look at the whole document, look at the preamble, but in looking at the principles, you'll notice that each one has a theme. So the first one, for example, Principle 1 is really related to the people who we serve. And that includes the clients who we see, patients who we see. It even includes any person or even an animal if they are involved in research with us. So remember that in Asha we have not only speech-language pathologists, audiologists, but we also have hearing and speech scientists. So you could have scientists who are using mice for an experiment. Principle 2 is related to us as the professional, our responsibility to be the most competent professional that we can. So all of the rules that come under that are related to that particular focus. Principle 3 is related to our responsibility to the public. And Principle 4 is how we interact with other professionals within our profession as well as those who may be in other professions. So each principle has a focus, and I want you to be aware of that. So there are 2 tasks that I want to complete. One is a Code of Ethics review. So I want to look at the preamble and also do and glance through each of the principles. And then the second thing is to review an ethical dilemma and apply the Code of Ethics to the dilemma. So the Thursday class had an opportunity to do this in the session. The Tuesday class did not, so I do want to walk through it. So this is even beneficial for the Thursday class as well as a review. Okay, so now we're in the Code of Ethics document. And just want to scroll through that. You have this posted to Blackboard, and make sure that you download a PDF. I actually presented did an ethics presentation to an organization in Baltimore called ABC. It's an association for Baltimore City, speech-language pathologists in Baltimore City, and I presented an ethics presentation, and one of the questions that I asked is how many of them actually had a copy of the Code of Ethics, and particularly at that time it had just changed over to the new Code of Ethics, and most of them did not have it. So this is something that you do want to have so that you can go back and refer to it. So as you look in the preamble, it talks about the history of Asha, and it talks about it being a framework and a guide. And I want to again remember this talks about a focused guide. I want to highlight that because remember we talked about the difference between law, and when we look at something like code of ethics, as it is established by Asha, this represents guidelines for us as opposed to law, okay? And then also, when you look at this next statement, it says is partly obligatory and disciplinary and partly aspirational and descriptive. So when you look at a lot of those words, one of the things that stands out is the word obligatory. This means that we have an obligation to follow it. Disciplinary is that there would be some consequences if we don't. And again, this is if Asha is aware, there could be some disciplinary outcome involved. Aspirational means that it's what we aspire to, so that we want to do the very best that we can. So this is showing us or encouraging us to be the best that we can. The next thing that I want to point out in the Code of Ethics that's also in the preamble is who does it apply to. So this is also important. So it applies to any member who has the C's, any member of the association who does not have the C's. And again, people may be surprised by that. So you can be a member of Asha but not have your C's. And this might be for someone who is a scientist who's not practicing in the field. It could also be for someone who's a member but they've no longer kept up their C's because they've retired, but they still have a membership in the association. Also, the next might also be interesting to some people, that you can be a non-member but also have your C's. So this could be someone who has completed all the requirements for CCC, which you will, that's your focus for your clinical fellowship year. And then there are two fees. One is to be a member, one is for your certificate of clinical competence. And I do encourage you to keep your membership. There's so many benefits to being a member of Asha, but some people may keep their certification and not be a member. It's kind of rare. However, in audiology, for example, because they have their own organization that was established several years ago specifically for audiologists, some may opt to do that, to be in that category. And then this next one is an applicant for certification or for membership and certification. So for all of you, as you're signing your, starting your CF and working on establishing your CCCs, you are under these principles. The other thing is, as we go further along, if I, as a member of Asha, a certified member of Asha, am bound by following the C's, I am also responsible to make sure that anyone under me, any student or assistant, is also following the C's as well. Okay, so again, this next part says that there are 4 principles, which we went over each area and the theme for each area, which we'll take a look at. And then also, once again, it mentions that the code is designed to give guidance, so that it's a guideline, and that it may not address every specific situation. It can't possibly cover all possible ethical dilemmas, but we're supposed to use this to provide some guidance for us. Okay, as we go down also, they have terminology, so if there are certain terms that you're not sure of, they're included here. You see conflict of interest, for example, which is one that we spoke of. I think crime is pretty self-explanatory. I wanted to mention impaired practitioner, because I'm not sure I had it in the other video, but I know we did mention this in Thursday class. But I talked about some of the common reasons that the Asha Board of Ethics is contacted for dilemmas, and impaired practitioner is one. So the meaning of that is someone who is in practice and they may be suffering from addiction, or it could also be a health-related condition. There's a case in the state of Maryland that the Maryland board dealt with, and there was an individual who was actively practicing but who was obviously showing some reduced cognitive capacities. I believe it was onset of dementia, and that person was eventually reported, but there were also some problems because there were individuals, other professionals who knew that he was not able to, that he was impaired, and that his practice was potentially affecting the clients who he was serving, and so other certified SLPs should have reported him sooner. Other licensed SLPs should have reported him sooner. So there was some fallout about that, not just for the person who was impaired. You see other terminology like informed consent, which we mentioned, other things that are listed there. So just be aware of some of the terms. Plagiarism, for example, you might not expect to see it there. Of course, we talk about it in our courses, but that is also right within the Code of Ethics. And then, as we said, each principle gives you a description of that section. So Principle 1, individuals shall hold their responsibility to hold paramount. Don't worry, I'm not going to read this word for word, but to hold paramount the welfare of persons they served is a statement that you'll see here in the Asha Code of Ethics, as well as you'll see it sometimes the same words used in state codes of ethics as well. And then after that, you have different rules that apply. So the rules are listed here. Again, I'm not going to read through, verbatim what's seen here, but I want you to skim through. You'll see that there are things like related to discrimination, things about how you represent your credentials, not delegating to tasks to people who are not qualified to do those tasks. It even talks about how you work with students or other people who you may be supervising. So all of this is how you protect the person who you are providing services to, or, as I said, individuals who might be involved in your research. So any of these things, even so, look at L, for example, this, the fact that you can't really guarantee anything. So if you've been on my diagnostic team, you may have heard me say that or talk about that in terms of guarantee. Oops, sorry, I need to pause. Okay, sorry, I had to pause. It was getting loud. Animals were wrestling around me. Okay, so anyway, even things like the word telepractice, the fact that this was updated because telepractice was not in there previously, that's there as well. Talks about things like confidentiality, how you maintain your records, the fact that you make sure that you are not impaired, those are there as well. Then you come down to Principle of Ethics 2, as we mentioned. This is related to you being the best person that you can be, making sure that you're competent. So this section also relates to making sure that you have your continuing education requirements met. And G has to do with if you're using any type of technology or instrumentation, making sure that all of that is current so that you're not using something that is out of date, or if it's something that has to be calibrated, for example, making sure that that is appropriate as well. Principle 3, which we mentioned, has to do with how you interact with the public. So this has to do with how you present yourself with the public, making sure you're not having any conflicts of interest. Also, this would have to do with things like advertising, defrauding people, any billing misrepresentation, that type of thing. Ethics 4, principle of ethics 4. This has to do with how we interact. So making sure, if you look at things like collaborative and harmonious interprofessional and intraprofessional relationship. So we saw a scenario, I gave you a scenario at the beginning where there was a rural area and there was a speech language pathologist who was losing business, and then who wanted to make a complaint about another SLP and was asking the CF to spread the word that he was filing a complaint about this person's practice. And obviously that was very shady and wrong, but a lot of that comes under here with this principle of ethics 4, about working collaboratively, about not making disparaging comments against other people. So like D, for example, right. E, so anyway, quite a few things here. Of course, any sexual activities with other individuals who you have a professional relationship with. And then this I, individuals shall not knowingly allow anyone under their supervision to engage in any practice that violates the code of ethics. That's the one I wanted to point out, which is the piece of it that means that as a supervisor, I have to make sure that my students, or if I'm responsible for any assistants, that they are not doing anything that would violate code of ethics. And then it would be on me, because if they don't have their C's under Asha, I would be the one who would fall under this, because that would be my responsibility. He talks about discrimination and various things. So I want you, to look at shall not file or encourage others to file complaints that disregard or ignore facts, etc. So just making false claims against other people. So there's a lot to unpack, a lot to look at. You're not expected to memorize this whole thing, but you are expected to be familiar with it, so that as you skim through and that you see all the information there, then when something comes up, you can say, okay, that sounds familiar, let me go to the code of ethics to see where that is. Or if you're not sure, well, let me comb through the code of ethics just to see if there's something that seems to speak to that. Okay, so now that we've looked at the code of ethics, what I'd like you to do is take a look at this ethics dilemma number 6. And I'm not going to read it word for word. I will let you take a look at it. I have attached it. It's posted here as an attachment, so you can download it and look at it, or just pause and read it on the screen. But I want you to read through this case, and then I want you to take a look at this case alongside of the code of ethics. And I want you to find within the code of ethics any rules which apply to it. So I want you to look in each principle, principle 1, principle 2, principle 3, principle 4, and under each of the principles, see if there are any rules that may apply. There may not be something applicable in each of those sections, but I want you to make sure that you do indicate any that might be related to this ethical dilemma that I have here. Okay, so that is your task.